Just a very warm welcome to everyone who joined us this evening. Hello from Athens. Our IPT talk today is about a very interesting topic. It is about fake news in ancient Greek literature. And it's a very important topic for us here at the Institute because we are extremely sensitive with the problem of disinformation and fake news since we are involved in a Horizon project called Titan, and we try to fight disinformation through critical thinking and Socratic methodologies. So we are bringing some very interesting philosophical literature and other vehicles to this battle against disinformation in the European Union. And today we have Raquel Fornieles from Madrid, from Spain. She's going to speak about a very specific area and a very interesting area of fake news applied in ancient Greek literature. Just to say a few words about Raquel, she studied journalism and classics, actually, and it's a very interesting combination. And now she's a lecturer of Greek philology at the University of Madrid. And her research interests are ranging from topics associated with Greek linguistics and literature. She's the author of this very interesting indeed book, The Concept of News in Ancient Greek Literature. And currently, her research focuses on impoliteness and politeness phenomena, indirect speech acts, and irony in Greek oratory, specifically in speeches by Lysias, Aeschines, and Demosthenes. Raquel, thank you very much. It's a great honor for us. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Yanis, Yanis Stamatelos for inviting me to participate in the IPT Talk Series, and of course, the Institute of Philosophy and Technology. I am very happy to be here today and to have the opportunity to talk to you about the concept of fake news in ancient Greek literature. And of course, thank you very much to all of you who have joined us for this talk. I hope I won't let you down. Well, let's go. The first thing I want to say today is that this paper, this contribution, is only a small part of a much larger study. My doctoral thesis, The Transmission of News in Ancient Greek Literature. My thesis aims to show that the concept of news that we have today is not a modern invention, but rather a social and cultural institution that has been passed down to us by the ancient Greeks as a legacy. This doctoral thesis approached the concept of news by analyzing the lexical family derived from angelos, the Greek term for the messenger. As is well known, the angelos is traditionally considered to be the person in charge to convey news, especially in Greek tragedy. My study was published as a monograph just a year ago with a significant novelty. I included a chapter dealing with fake news because, as I will explain in a few minutes, this term became extremely popular after the defense of my doctoral thesis, and I thought it was really appropriate to give it more prominence. But this is the question: what are we talking about when we refer to fake news? Well, the concept of fake news has to do, above all, with hoaxes or false pseudo-news aimed at generating disinformation. The term was very soon included into the Oxford English Dictionary, which defines the expression fake news as news that combines or incorporates false, fabricated, or deliberately misleading information, or that is characterized as or accused of doing so. The Oxford English Dictionary tells us also that the first record of fake news dates back to the 1890s in Milwaukee Daily Journal. However, the term has become really familiar to us much more recently because it was popularized by Donald Trump during and after his presidential campaign and election in 2016. Obviously, this expression, the concept of fake news, is very connected, very linked to a very specific and current sociocultural context. And we cannot understand fake news without taking into account the present days media, mass media, and social networks. However, the analysis of Angelos and its derivatives, in my opinion, provides clear evidence that false, fake news acquire a more than remarkable importance in ancient Greek literature, especially in Greek tragedy and in Greek historiography. In general terms, I analyzed this lexical family in a very broad corpus, ranging from the Homeric poems to Greek oratory in the classical period. And the first thing to note from the analysis of the derivative of Angelos is that only 3 of the 52 terms documented in the entire analyzed corpus, specifically the adjective pseudangelos, the verb pseudangeleo, and the noun pseudangelia, only these 3 are terms specifically coined to refer to the transmission of fake news. Besides, these terms are very far from productive since they only occur once each of them. Let's go the terms. They are here. Pseudangelos does appear in the Iliad, and remember that Iris is the god and the goddess in charge of passing on the messages, advices, and orders from other gods, and she is especially linked to Zeus, who orders her in this passage to demand that Poseidon leaves the battlefield. The god says to Iris, go on your way now, swift Iris, to the Lord Poseidon, and give him all this message, nor be a false messenger. Well, the verb pseudangeleo, on the other hand, only occurs once in an Aristophanic comedy, specifically in verbs. In this passage, the verb refers to a herald designated as an angelos by the main character of the comedy, by Pisistratus. He says the messenger does not seem to have announced false news. Here is someone coming along now singing of eagles. As for pseudangelia, this noun denotes the false information, the false announcement. It also appears only once in a really interesting passage in Xenophon's on the cavalry commander, and its presence in this single text is really striking, given the importance that Xenophon, the author, gives to lies as a perfect war strategy, and also as a means of intimidating the enemies. This is the passage. He says, the means to employ for scaring the enemy are false ambuscades, false reliefs, and false news, pseudangelias. An enemy's confidence is greatest when he is told that the other side is in difficulties and is preoccupied. Well, as I just said, these are the three only derivatives of angelos that designate false news. And in my opinion, they are so few because angelos and its derivatives are terms associated with the truth. And no one distrusts the words of a messenger, as I am going to explain in a few minutes. Therefore, when someone wants to transmit fake news, he or she does so by resorting both to the lexicon that a reliable angelos would use to transmit news and to certain conventions related to this figure, to the angelos. And to show a clear example of this, I will now focus on Greek tragedy. Well, the concept of news in Greek tragedy is clearly linked to the angelos as the news reporter. In fact, in Greek tragedy, the angelos is a specialized character with a very specific purpose, with a very specific role. His function is to transmit news that constitutes a fundamental part of the drama. In other words, he is the person in charge of announcing news that cannot be represented on stage, but which is necessary for the development of the dramatic action. In Why Messenger Speeches, a really exhaustive study on this character, on the messenger, Bremer explains a number of reasons for the need for a messenger scene. Firstly, the presence of the chorus makes scene shifts practically impossible. We have to think that, we have to remember that Attic tragedy deals with heroes, and those heroes cannot stay at home without moving around. Greek tragedians run into a problem when representing a scene shifts. The main character's movement was directly opposed to the static nature of the chorus, which, once on stage, remains in the orchestra, and the location was fixed at one point. The arrival of an angelos to report what happened at another location was a very effective way to get around the problem. The messenger also enters the scene to report crowd scenes. Let us, for example, think about the Battle of Salamis reported by the messenger of Aeschylus' Persians. Let us remember that the chorus remains static so that it is impossible to count on many people. And this kind of scenes has the need of a lot of people. Once again, the arrival of a messenger could be the best solution, could solve the problem. Another reason to justify the messenger scenes was the need to report miracles and supernatural events. For example, the giant bull that emerges from a wave in Euripides' Hippolytus and attacks Hippolytus himself, or the incredible, the miraculous disappearance of Iphigenia in Iphigenia at Aulis. Obviously, there were no special effects, and a good solution to represent this kind of miracles was found again in the messenger as a reporter of this news. On the other hand, the messenger is also a character in charge of reporting deaths. And this is really interesting because although death is really crucial in Greek tragedy, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides all avoided depicting it on stage as much as possible. Here we have, for example, Jocasta, who commits suicide when it is discovered that Oedipus is really her son and husband. Her suicide is reported by a messenger in Oedipus Rex. And this is Deyanira, who also commits suicide when she realizes that she has caused the death of Heracles in Sophocles' Women of Trachis. So, what are the main features of the messenger of this angeloi? In the first. Okay, here I am. As I have already said, their main function is to inform, to give some new information, to transmit news, and they themselves make this clear when they enter the scene, as we see, for example, in the case of the messenger of Persians. He arrives and he says, "Oh me, it is terrible to be the first to announce terrible news, but I have no choice but to reveal the whole sad tale, Persians. The whole of the Oriental army has been destroyed." Another aspect to be considered is the lexicon, really important, because messengers do use a very specific vocabulary, angelos or any of its derivatives. Here we have angelein kaka. And if they do not use these terms, they make use of some other expressions, which are like standard formulas to introduce the long narrative, the messenger speeches, to explain, to expand the news. These terms who act like formulas are, for example, heko saphe feron, heko kai fero kai nous logus, fero nous logus, semaino plus the accusative, and so on. In fact, this can be seen immediately in these tables from a paper I published some years ago, in which I offer a proposal of classification of characters who are to be considered messengers in Greek tragedy. Here we have the angeloi in Aeschylus. You can see angelein, apangelo, angelu logon, angelu logos, feres afesti pragos, hekos afe, angelon, kakangelo glosse, angelos, and so on. Here we have the examples from Sophocles, more examples from Sophocles, angelon, tisemainon neon, kauton angelon, angelos, and here the tables dealing with the messenger in Euripides. On the other hand, I have to say that these messengers, these angeloi, enjoy absolute credibility. And this is for a simple reason, because most of them are anonymous angeloi, although we know that many of them are loyal servants who are described as faithful, piston angelon, or true, saphes etimos, angelos. Thus, veracity is related to the reported news because nobody doubts the absolute reliability of the news that these kind of messengers bring, even if some of it is not true. And if there is one thing that favors the credibility of the messenger, of the angelos, it is his or her status as an eyewitness. And I am talking about autopsy, the autopsia, the act of seeing something with one's own eyes. These angeloi make this clear, make this status really clear, whenever they can, as happens in this passage from Aeschylus 7 against Thebes. The messenger says, "I come bringing definite news from the army out there. I was myself an eyewitness of what they were doing. Hekos afe ferum and autos katoptos deimi ego." And finally, Angeloi store in their own scene. They have their own scene, the messenger scene, that has a tripartite structure. The messenger gives the piece of news in a conversation with the chorus or another character on stage. In this kind of brief dialogue, so-called the psychometric prologue, which ends with a P question with pos, pollo tropo, pu, and so on. And then this piece of news is expanded with the Angelike Resis, that is a long narrative report and very, very long report. And the scene finally ends with an epilogue or with a brief dialogue. And now, with all this information, it is time to ask a very simple question. How to transmit fake news in Greek tragedy? And the answer is really easy. Obviously, by behaving, by acting like a messenger, like an angelos. From now on, and to give a specific example, I am going to focus on a tragedy in which fake news is the driving force. Behind the tragic action and response to a plan for revenge. I'm referring to Sophocles' Electra. I recall or explain very briefly the context. Agamemnon returns from the Trojan War and finds at home that his wife, Clytemnestra, has a lover, Aegisthus. Clytemnestra kills Agamemnon, and Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra and brother of Iphigenia and Electra, plans to avenge his father's death. In order to succeed, Orestes asks for help from a pedagogue, faithful, loyal, and close to the family. Orestes asks this man to pretend to be a messenger, to be an angelos. The plan is presented in the prologue of the tragedy. Orestes is talking to the old man and tells him that when he consulted the Delphic oracle, Phoebus gave him this order, that alone and without arms, he should kill the traitors. For that reason, Orestes asks the pedagogue to enter the palace, find out what is happening inside, and come out to report it. He says, we have the example in the screen, so that you may report to us out of your knowledge. As you can see, here we have the verb angelo, angeles. Before the servant leaves to carry out this task, Orestes gives him some instructions. He will introduce himself as a Phocian stranger sent by a friend of the family. He has to pretend to be a Phocian stranger sent by a friend of the family, and this is the most important part of the plan. Orestes says, orders, tell them, Angele, a sudden accident befell Orestes and he is dead. Swear it on oath. Say, in the Pythian games, he was rolled out of his chariot at high speed. Let that be your story. As you can see here, the imperative Angele could not be more significant. Orestes is asking the old man to be a messenger, to behave like a messenger. The rest of the plan is as follows. Orestes says, meanwhile, we will first crown my father's tomb as the god ordered. Then we will return here, bearing in our hands an arm of bronze, now hidden, as you know, in the brushwood, so that we may gladden them with the false tidings that this body of mine exists no more, but has been consumed with fire and reduced to ashes. Shortly after, The loyal pedagogue will obey, and as soon as he enters the palace, he addresses Clytemnestra in these terms: "Greetings, royal lady. I come with news from a friend, good news for you and for Aegisthus." The passage is in the stichomimetic prologue of the messenger scene, and the queen therefore has to ask the old man for more information, and he briefly delivers the news. "Orestes is dead," he says, in one short word. Clytemnestra then asks him to give more details of the events and says, "But you, sir, tell me exactly in what manner, Pollo Tropo, he was destroyed." As I explained previously, the formula is with a P question, the main of giving place to the Angelique resist is with a P question, and this is what happens here. In this case, the P question is Pollo Tropo. And then the old man shows off delivering a fantastic, a splendid messenger speech, the Angelique resist, worthy of the best of the Angeloi, despite being completely true, despite completely false, despite being invented. This is the beginning of the resist. Is really long, but we have here the beginning. "I was sent for that purpose, and I will tell you all," he says. Well, the pedagogue ends his lengthy account in a perfect manner, in a perfect way, by resorting to the autopsy characteristic of trustworthy messengers. At the end of his account, he says, "Such is my story. It is grievous even to hear, but for us, witnesses who looked on, it was the greatest of sorrows that these eyes have seen." The verbs of perception used by the pedagogue to certify his status as an eyewitness have the desired effect. The lie has not been discovered. The credibility of the old pseudo-messenger is completely intact, thanks to the reliable evidence he has given, or at least this is the queen's opinion, because Clytemnestra says, "How can you say in vain when you have brought me sure proofs of his death?" Pist ehon tecmeria. In the second part of the plan, Orestes, pretending to be a foreigner, arrives before Electra, before his sister, with an urn containing, in which were supposed to be her ashes, and tells her sister that he has been sent by a certain Strophius to announce something concerning Orestes. He brings with him the mortal remains of Agamemnon's son. The passage is really ironic, is full of tragic irony. The plan works perfectly. Aegisthus wants the foreigners to tell him the piece of news in person, and asks Electra where the strangers are who are said to have brought news for them of Orestes' death. He questions, "Which of you can tell me where those false strangers are who are said to have brought reports for us?" He means Angeli, that Orestes passed away amidst the chariots. And finally, here we have once again the verb angelo. Clytemnestra's daughter claims to be unaware of this, and he insists. He says again, "Have they in fact reported him truly dead?" England once again. And finally, when Electra replies that they proved it with more than just words, her mother's lover confirms his worst fears. Throughout this trick plotted by Orestes, the verb angelo, as we can see in the last slides, occurs up to 6 times, four times in the speech of the Phonies and twice in that of Aegisthus, and always in reference to the same piece of news, the false death of the son of Agamemnon, the invented death of the son of Agamemnon. However, the plan, as we know, ends successfully, really successfully, since Orestes deceives everybody and fulfills his purpose of killing Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. As you can imagine, this is not the only case of fake news in Greek tragedy. We have some other examples in Aeschylus, in Sophocles, and of course in Euripides. And tragedy obviously is not the only genre in which we can find fake news. The works of historians provide us with an ideal scenario for the dissemination of this kind of news. And I am referring, of course, to war. In this context, the terms derived from angelos that help us to identify the presence of fake news are specifically pseudangelia, evangelion, angelia, angelo, angelma, diangelo, exangelo, and proangelo. And the fake news reported in the works of historians is used for 2 purposes. On the one hand, as a tactic to encourage the troops when a problem arises, making the soldiers believe that there is nothing to fear because everything is apparently under control. Or as a strategy to intimidate or to deceive the enemies. Let's see some examples. The following passages show the intention with which Agesilaus, a master of deception, manipulates the news concerning the defeat of the Lacedaemonians at the Battle of Cnidus. We are told by Xenophon that the fleet commanded by Pisander was defeated by the one led by the Athenian Conon. I'm presenting first the real piece. This is the real piece of news received by Agesilaus. The author says, when he was at the entrance to Boeotia, the sun seemed to appear crescent shaped, and word was brought Engelthe to him that the Lacedaemonians had been defeated in the naval battle, and the admiral Pisander had been killed. As I just said, this is the real piece of news. However, Agesilaus decides to distort this information, this piece of news. As explains the author, Xenophon, he says that this is the passage. Now, I guess Agesilaus, on learning these things, at first overcome with sorrow, but when he had considered that the most of the troops were the sort of men to share gladly in good fortune, if good fortune came, but that if they saw anything unpleasant, they were under no compulsion to share in it, thereupon, changing the report, he said that word had come, angeloito, that Pisander was dead, but victorious in the naval battle. And at the moment of saying these things, he offered sacrifice as if for good news, Evangelia, and sent around to many people portions of the victims which had been offered, so that when a skirmish with the enemy took place, the troops of Agesilaus won the day in consequence of their report that the Lacedaemonians were victorious in the naval battle. Well, Xenophon puts the verb angelo in the speech of Agesilaus, the same verb with which the real news had been reported to him, but in this case, to report a false triumph, a false victory to his men. This is not contrary to expectations because it is exactly what some characters do in Greek tragedy, as I have shown a few minutes ago. This is what some characters do in Greek tragedy, to lie without anyone questioning their words. Again, we can see how angelo, as well as other derivatives of angelos, because here we have also the term evangelia, the plural evangelia from evangelion, are associated with the truth. In this case, moreover, Agesilaus accompanies the lie with a sacrifice, which gives the sin a great deal of solemnity. And finally, let us recall, for example, the stratagem of Themistocles at the Battle of Salamis. If we remember Herodotus' account, Themistocles sent an emissary to the Persian army with false news. He had to say that the Greeks were terrified and it was the perfect time to destroy them, but it was completely false. The result is well known to all of us. And again, this information, this piece of news is referred as pista, as safes, credible to in the text, in the account of Herodotus. And finally, to conclude my presentation, I would simply like to say that this is only a first approach to the concept of news based on the analysis of a very, very specific vocabulary. But there is still a lot of work to be done. From now on, for example, I plan to study some other terms that I have already seen that also designate fake news. For example, feme, fatis, kleidon, akoe, logos, throos, and so on. And I also want to approach the subject, this topic, this really interesting topic from some other perspectives beyond the lexical point of view. And this is my contribution, and now I only have to say that thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you very much for this informative, detailed, and very interesting presentation. Thank you indeed for giving us this knowledge about fake news and ancient Greek literature. I think the most important now step is to have questions. We have 15 minutes at least from the audience. So any questions? Kazoo, Mr. Kazoo? We can hear you. No, perhaps no? there is. Okay, any other question? Would you like? Yes, Miss Karen Bassi.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, fine.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Raquel. It was a wonderful talk and so clear and such an important topic. I really appreciate it very much. I wonder if it is the case that, at least in the examples you provided for us, it is the case that the reader or viewer, let's say the reader of the historiographical text or the viewers of the tragic text or the tragic plays, know that it's fake news. I'm thinking, for example, of a counterexample, which may be, I'm asking the question then, the so-called deception speech of Ajax in Sophocles' Ajax. So my general question is whether or not, unlike on Twitter, one might say that you don't know if it's fake news, right? You're not told in advance. So by the way, this isn't a true statement. So there is a kind of question of veracity which is answered in these examples that you've given us. But are there other counterexamples? And I don't know if you would agree that that very controversial deception speech in Ajax may be a counterexample. But so it's this question about where the doubt lies and how the doubt is both referred to and answered in these examples. Thank you very much. I'm going to mute myself now, I think. Yeah.
I don't know if I really have understand your question. I think we have some problems with the definition of fake news, maybe, or not. I have to say, I said that at the beginning of my talk. We only can speak about fake news when we have into account the current social and cultural context, because obviously Herodotus was not thinking about fake news. But in the case of Greek tragedy, I think fake or false news had, for example, have a lot to do with, I don't know how to explain, but maybe with, I think it's a very useful resource in order to perform tragic irony, for example. And it has a lot to do with deception, with fakes. And in the case of Herodotus or the historians, I think my opinion is that we can speak about fake news or disinformation, at least disinformation, because in war, this kind of news of false reports are used as a strategy, also as a strategy to deceive, to give false information to the other side, to the enemies, in order to defeat them. I don't know if I have satisfied your expectations with my answer.
No, thank you very much. But the question had to do with the reception of the news on the part of the viewer or the reader. That was my, the fact that we know that it's fake, right? I mean, we're told this is not true.
With the
thank you.
From the point of view of the reader, I don't know, but from the point of view of the author, for example, from the point of view of Sophocles, I think obviously it's a resource, a dramatic resource for increasing the dramatic pathos and to increase the presence of tragic irony. I don't know. I think it could be a possible point of view, a plausible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Raquel. And any other question that you would like to ask? I have one question. Of course, there might be another one from the audience, and it's very close to what Karen asked. I think that there is some clarifications concerning the term of disinformation and other forms of information disorder, as we call them today. There are misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. I think the difference, at least from a philosophical point and ethical point of view, is the intention of the one who produces fake news. If you want to cause harm, yes, it is a form of disinformation. So I think that in the examples that you showed, there are these intentions. You mentioned the idea that you acting like being a messenger. So the fake has also an ontological status. Fake seems to be a pretending. Not only the content, but also the one who pretends to become a messenger. And I wonder if this could be a possible reading of ancient Greek tragedy. I'm not sure about history of another universe, of course. But I would like to know what you think about that. Is there any issue of intention? So can we make the difference between just fake news and some very serious fake news that they want to cause harm, and we can call them disinformation phenomena in Greek tragedy?
Okay, of course, in tragedy there is a clear intention, because it is the example of Orestes, for example, is a perfect example of a plan of revenge. And I think it's really, really important, the fact that Orestes says the pedagogue, please be a messenger, not only go to the palace and bring and give the news. No, you have to behave like a messenger. And this is like a plan, a very, very prepared plan, very conscious plan. Okay. And the intention is really clear. And I think I have to think about this possible explanation, because all right, it's all right. I agree completely. Orestes wants to cause harm, but I think the same happens in the text of historians, for example, because when someone wants to cause harm in the enemy, the intention is negative. They want to introduce false information.
So there is an intention there. I think so. This is extremely interesting because there are so many textual cases, incidents that you can find this idea. So that would be very fruitful to consider various aspects of ancient Greek drama and history, and to reconsider the context and the content, actually, of these different disciplines and how we study them today. So I think it's a very interesting approach, in my view. And of course, we have just a couple of minutes for maybe a last question, if there is any clarification. Or of course, this is an open topic. We will actually, it's a new topic, and we would like very much to thank Raquel for sharing with us her research and knowledge about this topic, which is also really alive, modern, and vibrant today for us. And we are considering and reconsidering these aspects. And I would like warmly to thank all the participants who joined us and with great enthusiasm and interest to this talk all these weeks. And thank you very much from the Institute of Philosophy and Technology here in Athens, and have a great evening. Bye-bye, and thank you very much, Raquel.
Bye, thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.